on a Friday afternoon here. So we'll get started. Everyone can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Sierra, for kind of keeping an eye on the lobby there for me. So welcome to the 2024 Nevada Federal Lands Access Program webinar for federal land managers. So you guys, just a quick intro from me. My name is Andrew Valdez. I'm a planner with Central Federal Lands, but I did spend many years kind of on the land management side, both with Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife, and some time in local government. So, I've been in your shoes, and I'm here to help you sort of through the process. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the Nevada FLAP webpage. So, if you don't want your name and face out there in the public domain, feel free to stay off camera and follow up with me offline if you have any questions. Second, this webinar is geared mostly for the federal land managers. We did host a webinar on Wednesday for potential applicants, and it was quite well attended. So I think we had about 55 folks on that call. So I'd anticipate that some of you may start hearing from them about potential projects. We've slotted a couple hours for today. I've only got about 30 slides to go through. So the presentation itself will run maybe about an hour, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A after I'm done. So here's our general outline for today. This may be review for some of you, but it sounds like we've got some folks that are, totally new to the FLAP program. So I'm going to cover federal lands, highways, and the FLAP program, basically A to Z. And then we'll get into the elements of the application packet that relate to the land managers. And as I said, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. There's also some key points to keep an eye out for, as indicated by those yellow icons there. So federal lands, highways. We're basically the Department of Transportation for you all in the federal land world. As I'm sure you're all familiar with, about a third of the United States is federal land, and development and stewardship of the transportation systems on those federal lands is our responsibility. Just a bit of history here. We're the last part of the Federal Highway Administration that functions like a DOT, in that we plan, design, and build all of our projects. The rest of federal highways is under the federal aid system, where funding goes to the individual states, and then federal highways has a stewardship and oversight role with the state DOTs and other local agencies. So, our mission of providing access to and through U.S. federal lands is sort of captured by this mission statement here. And this is where Central Federal Lands, my office, sits within larger U.S. DOT. We're a division office of federal lands, highways, and you can see the land management logos here. And this is, where we have this two-way relationship with you all. And this map just shows how the country's split up into Eastern, Central, and Western division offices. So Central is located in Lakewood, Colorado. This is where I sit. And our region covers 14 Western states from North Dakota to Texas to California, and also including Nevada. These are our core capital programs. So today we're mostly going to be talking about the Federal Lands Access Program, or FLAP, and the Federal Lands Transportation Program, or FLTP. These two programs were established to address access to and through federal lands. And, kind of in an ideal world, these programs would complement and support each other. And we'll get into that angle a little bit later. But the easiest way to think about these is FLTP is for federally owned assets, and FLAP is for non-federally owned, but provides access to public federal lands. FLAP projects are programmed through a call for projects, which we did open for Nevada on this Monday. And the way it works is the owner of the facility or the agency that maintains the facility has to submit the application. So typically this is a state DOT or other local government agency like a county or a town. But the applicant does have to submit the application with support and coordination with the relevant federal land unit. So that's where you all come in. And I'll get more into your specific responsibilities in the application process a little bit later. As I think probably some of you know, FLTP is managed by the FLMAs at the regional or national level. And we deliver a lot of those projects, but we actually don't have anything to do with the project selection. And every land management agency has a different process. We also have programs for U.S. federally recognized tribes and emergency federal relief, the TTP and ERFO, but we're not going to be talking too much about those today. Just a little bit more about Central. So as I mentioned, we have 14 states, including Hawaii and some Pacific territories. And we're really not just about moving people from A to B. U.S. federal lands are the nation's treasures, and the built environment, needs to take into account things like visitor experience, resource conservation, view sheds, and we're really at the forefront of delivering context-sensitive projects like that. And as I mentioned before, we provide cradle-to-grave services, much like a state DOT. Central fills a kind of a niche in the transportation ecosystem, since our projects tend to be, rather unique. And we do have a deep bench, both among staff and the contractors and consultants we work with. We really do have a lot of expertise in both project delivery and administrative business operations that you see here. So from like long-range planning to environmental clearance and NEPA, right-of-way and utilities, project closeout, we really do it all. Central is a project manager-centric organization. So if a project that acts as your unit is selected, there will be a single point of contact assigned in the project manager, and nobody has to navigate a Byzantine federal bureaucracy to get information. We do operate under performance metrics, which include obligation of over 95% of program funds on a yearly basis. We really do try to get those, dollars out the door. And we want to see over 75% of those dollars landing on the ground and going towards capital improvements and not going towards administration and overhead. And as part of project closeout, we do send out satisfaction surveys, and there we also shoot for 85% and above. And then finally, we also do a majority of design, planning, and environmental work in-house. So that helps us maintain, institutional technical expertise. So moving on to FLAP. So this is a program that's authorized by Congress in national transportation legislation, first in MAP 21, and it's been continued through every reauthorization through the current one, which is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill. You may have also heard of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's the same thing, just a different name. Bill authorized around $300 million per year of its life, starting in 2022, and bill expires in 2026. And we expect or hope that Congress will reauthorize FLAP in the next transportation bill. And again, its purpose, its goals are to improve transportation facilities that provide access to, are adjacent to, or located within federal lands, with an emphasis on high-use recreation sites and federal economic generators, which we'll get into a little bit later. FLAP funding is allocated to the states by a legislative formula, and this hasn't changed since MAP 21, but essentially it's a function of the percentage of federal lands within a state and federal public roadway mileage by state, with a few other factors like recreational visitation and federal bridges. And this is how funding shakes out on a national basis. So unsurprisingly, Western states are heavily favored because of the prevalence of federal lands. For central states, Nevada comes in fourth in funding with 81% of federal landmass, and that gives you an annual allocation of about $12 million per year. Frankly, that's not a lot of money in the transportation world, and of course, I wish we had more. But if we're talking things like, unpaved roads, trails, natural surface trailheads, planning projects, and other leveraged opportunities with partners, that funding does start to go a little bit farther. Bill did remove the local match, the local cash match requirement, but this is what the local requirements did used to be. In previous years, Nevada applicants did have to come up with at least a 5% local match. This also does put pressure on limited dollars. However, there are instances where it might make sense for a local or state agency to want to partially or mostly fund a project with federal aid dollars and just use FLAP as sort of a supplementary funding source. That's not totally uncommon, and of course helps us expand the program in any one state. I'll talk about this scenario a little bit more later, but generally, if you have a roadway where, say, half the daily traffic is accessing the federal land unit and the rest of the usage is either local traffic or through traffic, we'd want to see commensurate local funding. All right, so now let's get into eligibility. So sort of generically, improvements to or construction of any public highway, road, bridge, trail, or transit system located on or adjacent to federal lands. Eligibility activities include rehabilitation, restoration, construction, reconstruction, engineering and environmental compliance, operations and maintenance of transit facilities, and planning and research. But title or maintenance responsibility must be vested with a non-federal entity. So the agency with title or maintenance responsibility must be the applicant. There were some changes to FLAP under bill. As I mentioned, no more local match requirement. And there's expanded eligibility for what's called context-sensitive solutions. And these are projects that preserve scenic, aesthetic, historic, or environmental resources. So think things like a raised boardwalk over a wetland, for example. There's also expanded eligibility for signage, wayfinding, landscaping, and other visual mitigations. So interpretive panels, berming for visual improvements, things like that. Typically, those elements by themselves wouldn't be competitive in an application. We want to see the primary component of a project be a transportation facility, but now they can be included in a bigger project package. Here's a graphic of some common eligibility scenarios. So, at the top here, we've got a road or trail that starts outside the federal land unit and ends inside the federal land unit. Let's assume the red segment is locally owned and the blue segment here is federally owned. That whole alignment would be eligible if the local agency agrees to manage that blue segment of roadway or trail within the federal unit. And this is done through a maintenance agreement, and our office can provide, example contracts if needed. Second one down here is kind of the most straightforward scenario. You've got a road or facility that starts outside the federal land unit, ends at the federal land boundary at, say, like a trailhead or an entrance gate or a fee station. Both the road and the trailhead would be eligible. And then here at the bottom, you can have a road or facility starts outside the federal unit, ends short of the unit boundary. We typically wouldn't want to see anything farther than like 10 miles to be eligible. But if it leads to or provides access to a federal land unit, would be eligible. I do want to note that, kind of the farther you get from the federal land boundary, the less competitive an application is typically likely to be. A couple more things to note on eligibility. Tribal roads maintained by a tribe are eligible, but the roadway must access federal lands other than just the tribal lands. So tribal lands are not eligible federal lands as the destination for this program, since FLAP is, really about enhancing recreational access. The TTP, which I mentioned earlier, is intended to serve transportation needs for tribes and reservations. And then finally, land leased by the federal government is not eligible, must be federally owned. So does anyone want to take a guess as to what national park this is here in green? You'll win $1 million flat bucks, which are worth exactly $0. Anyone? Come on. Everyone else is multitasking. It's Rocky. I'm in Colorado. I should probably pick a Nevada one next time. This is another scenario that we see sometimes. You can have like a state park surrounding a reservoir that's managed by the Army Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation. Roads or even docks leading to the water that are within the park that are not, as long as they're not federally owned, those would all be eligible. And that's another opportunity for leveraged funds to be proposed in an application. So if the state park is already planning some improvements to the site, you could kind of all package it together into one larger application. So that's basic eligibility. Now let's talk preferred projects. So preference is given to transportation facilities providing access to high-use recreation sites and federal economic generators. So that's written into the legislation. Federal recreation, pretty straightforward. Any site used by the public to recreate on federal lands. High use is defined for a region or local area and not compared across, an entire state or, country. So not every county is going to have like the Grand Canyon. And federal economic generators are defined as any use of or on federal lands that increases aggregate investment or economic activity for a local community and or region. So think ski areas, energy production would technically be eligible. And then of course, recreation sites that have like a regional or national draw. Thing to keep in mind here is that the federal lands benefit really kind of has to be the center of the bullseye for an application to be competitive, especially if the applicant is asking for, 100% of a project to be funded with FLAP. The program is really intended to benefit the FLMAs and not, supplement a state or local mobility program. Partnerships really are what make excellent projects. We do love to see multiple agencies across federal, state, and local sectors come together to propose a project. This helps leverage our limited program dollars and helps address projects of mutual interest and greatest need. We also try to cultivate relationships between the federal and local agencies. A lot of times this, FedGov to local gov conversation doesn't happen organically, and our office is happy to facilitate those introductions if needed. So just to sort of put a button on this, these are the elements that make up a strong application. We like to see full reconstruction or rehabilitation of a roadway. Anything that expands modal access to a federal land unit, like a new bike lane or a new multi-use path or trail, wholesale bridge replacements. A lot of this can be a judgment call, but if we see a reasonable scope, realistic project estimate, good FLMA coordination and support from the FLMA, and the project meets the flat vision, that's typically going to be a pretty strong project. We typically don't do maintenance-only projects. The purpose of the program is to expand access and not fix a county's deferred maintenance backlog. Obviously, things like unclear or poorly written applications don't fare well. Of course, a project must meet, the basic eligibility criteria, and we always want to see good coordination with you all at the FLMA level. So any, maps or photos or other context you can provide the applicants. That's always helpful. Sometimes we see applications that seem more like urban or rural commuter routes or neighborhood streets, and the Fedlands access component is only maybe 10% of traffic counts. That's always okay, but in cases like those, we would want to see commensurate matching funds, since the access component is sort of secondary to another purpose. So here's a little more on the FLAP, FLTP leverage angle. Like I mentioned earlier, FLTP does count as leveraged funds in an application, and we love to see joint FLTP, FLAP projects. So, get with your regional or national transportation program managers and talk about what projects might be in the pipeline for your unit to see if there's any alignment with access needs. There are some conditions that we place on these kinds of projects. Programming Decisions Committee, or PDC, and FLMA need to concur on the project, and we'll talk about the PDC a little bit more later. Of course, the projects need to be contiguous or at least adjacent, and the project has to be managed as one delivery package, so we can realize those economies of scale. In some cases, the PDC may require the local agency to contribute local funds, but this is figured out sort of on a case-by-case basis. And this is just, a graphic example of how a joint FLTP, FLAP project could work. So say you have a $1 million, flat project in blue to improve a county road to the entrance of a national forest. And separately, there's an FLTP project to improve, the scenic drive to a parking area there in red. Those projects could be bundled and combined in a FLAP application. This is beneficial because the applicant generally will have a low or no cost burden, and they get to claim an overmatch of leveraged funds on the application. And this is great for us, because it'll be far cheaper to deliver one kind of bigger project than to try to mobilize to do two smaller projects. So this is sort of my call to action for you guys on the land management side to reach out to your contacts at the regional level to talk about, to see if there's some alignment there with the FLAP and FLTP programs. So moving on to project delivery, this is just sort of more an FYI for you all, but we do typically deliver all the selected projects unless there's a good reason for a state DOT or local agency to do so for these kind of, projects that are a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. All right, so who makes the programming decisions? Each state has a Programming Decisions Committee, or PDC. This is a three-person volunteer board that's established by a charter and made up of a state DOT rep, local government rep, and then our office, Federal Highways, has 1 seat. So in this case, Jill is the representative on the PDC for Nevada. And you can see the PDC responsibilities there, but it's essentially their task to ensure stewardship of the program from a statewide perspective. It's not their job to advocate for special projects in their areas or anything like that. Now, what you don't see here is FLMA representation on the PDC. Each state has an FLMA technical advisory group, or TAG. These are typically FLMA reps from the regional or national levels, and they advise the PDC, but they don't participate in programming decisions. Because these flat program dollars go to non-federal entities, and we don't want deadlocks in the decision process, we do give the asset owners kind of the final say. But feedback from the tags and the FLMA reps at the unit level is hugely important in the deliberative process. So FLMAs do have a seat at the table, even if it's not a voting seat at the table. All right, so now we're going to talk about the application process. So the link you see at the top of the slide there will take you to the main FLAP landing page. And there you see a map of the US and other info about the FLAP program. I just want to note that the URLs for all the federal land pages did just change. So make sure you use the new address in the slide deck you see here. Nevada is now green, which means the application process is open and we're accepting applications. So if you click on the state, it'll take you to the Nevada page, and that's where you can download all the application materials, see the call schedule, all that kind of stuff. Generally, calls for projects are open for 90 days, and we do try to schedule calls every 2 to 3 years, although inflation has somewhat changed that for us. One other thing to note, we'll typically program anywhere from 2 to 4 years of flat funding in any call. So for Nevada, there could be up to $48 million worth of projects programmed. And this really all depends on the mix of applications that we receive. And, we do this just because we don't want the size of a state's allocation to dictate the projects we do. We really just want to do the best projects. We also have flexibility to loan and borrow between states and between the federal lands divisions. So this does give us, a little bit further flexibility in making programming decisions and not being, hamstrung by a state's allocation. So if you click on Nevada, this is what the page looks like. Again, note the new URL up here. This is where the application materials are and call timeline, as I said. So, while the call for projects is open, I'd suggest, bookmarking this page. Information about your local PDC members is also here. So if you have a question for one of them, you can always reach out. And this is also where this slide deck and video recording will be posted after the meeting today. And this is where we would be going into the application process page by page. But since you will only be filling out the FLMA support forms, that's all we have to cover here. So this is what it looks like, and it's just one page, so not too onerous for you guys. The only trick here is that if a project does access more than one FLMA, we would want to see each agency submitting one of these forms. Everything else is pretty straightforward, but box 11 is pretty important. This is where the PDC will see how the applicants coordinated with you all in developing the project. Right? Is this a bridge to nowhere or a local need that's not really important to the FLMA, or is this something that really helps out the unit? So the more detail you can always provide here, the better. We do also encourage letters of support. So if local or regional FLMA leadership want to submit a letter, that's good too. You can just attach those as PDFs to the application. And there's also a box here to indicate if FLTP funds will be used, is box 12. So again, have those conversations at the regional levels or national levels about FLTP. And here's the process for next steps if your project is selected. So first we do a short list, and this just gives us a chance to scope the selected projects to make sure we're in the ballpark cost-wise. If your project is shortlisted, you'll get a notification letter from us, and we'll set up some meetings to talk through financial arrangements with the applicants and also any site visits. And then we work with the applicants and you guys to set up a site visit for our scoping engineers to come out and get boots on the ground and refine those cost estimates. And if the project still looks good, the PDC will place the project in our final program and then work out a delivery schedule. And then, like I said, typically we'll deliver it cradle to grave and close out the project. And finally, here's our Nevada timeline. So as I said, we opened the call on the 15th on Monday, and the call will be open for 90 days. We're targeting to have our deliberative process complete by fall of this year so that we could have a shortlist meeting potentially in September. We're giving ourselves sort of a generous 6 months to scope selected projects or shortlisted projects. Hopefully weather won't be too big of a factor in most of Nevada, but the engineers do need to be able to get eyes on the project, and sometimes weather can be an impediment. We'll try to get this done sooner, but I think at the very latest, we could expect to have scoping on the shortlisted projects hopefully complete by spring of 2025. And then that would put a final programming meeting sometime in May or June of 25. But again, if we can get scoping done sooner, we may be able to accelerate that milestone. And this would give us construction sometime, maybe in 26, probably 27. But a lot of this is project dependent, so that can move around a little bit depending. So lastly, I do want to acknowledge all the time and effort spent by the FLMAs on the Nevada integrated planning effort that our team, the planning team, has been involved in for the past couple of years. That document will help inform FLAP deliberations, but having a need identified in that plan is not a prerequisite for FLAP funding. I think we're all aware that there'll be some new projects that come out of this FLAP call. Our hope for that document is that it'll help elevate Fedlands access needs at the state level and inform STIP and TIP development so that, FLAP isn't the only funding source looking at these needs on the network. So really, that's it from me. This might have been a lot of new information for some of you. So I'm happy to hang on and answer any questions. And yeah, thank you for your attention this Friday afternoon.
Thank you as well. I feel like a full-fledged planner now. Thank you.
You got it.
Have a good weekend.
Hey,
Miles.
Andrew. Yeah, thank you. Hey, I wish our state engineer was on this call, but he's out on some personal leave. But I'm just curious, is it appropriate for agencies to approach, the whatever agency is maintaining or owns the road to, propose projects?
Definitely. In fact, like I guess kind of on a philosophical level, we would almost prefer it that way because again, this program is to benefit the land management agencies and not the state and local governments. Okay. So, your local road and bridge department, or, if you're in an MPO or something like that, or if you need to talk to NDOT, we definitely encourage those conversations.
Miles, you can send Avance and I an email if you have ideas.
Okay, I just sent an email off to Winnemucca and included Kalina on there.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I like this. The wheels are turning. Anybody else?
Hi there. I have a question. So I'm on the wrong call. I should have been on the Wednesday call because I'm an
Okay.
actual land manager of federal lands or lease agreement. And I have looked everywhere. I cannot find where that meeting took place and where the recording is on the website. So I'm sorry. That's kind of a basic question. I can't find it anywhere.
No worries, Liz. So I this could be due to these changes of URLs and stuff. I'll send you. Well, here, let me just drop. I'll just drop the new URL in the chat. I believe the applicants webinar just got posted either today or yesterday. Does everyone see this? So it'd be right here, video recording of applicants webinar. It's a lot of the same information. We do just kind of go into like more page by page, the application itself. But you know, if you got any questions, I'm here as a resource. You can reach directly out to me.
Thank you.
Where's the chat? There we go. And sorry, Liz, who are you with State Parks?
I'm with Clark County. We have a wetlands park. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're on, we connect to some federal lands, but we actually, half of the park is Bureau of Rec lands.
Gotcha. Very good. All right. Anyone else? Hopefully this is all your last meeting for Friday. Erica, hey there.
Hello, sorry. I'm listening in again, but the link that you added in the chat doesn't seem to work. I'm not sure if that's an internal link.
Someone else try it. Works for me. What is going on here?
And I found a different link just from, you know, Google, but it doesn't have the same links on it. It doesn't have the video.
These guys that run our pages. Okay. Well, let's see here.
The link doesn't work for me either.
Not working?
No.
Well, so I'm gonna drop this. This should work. This is YouTube. That'll take you to the applicants webinar, and then let's see the slide deck. We can try this slide deck, and then we may have to figure out what's going on here, because if people can't download the application, that's not good, obviously. So we'll do a little bit of work on our end, and send out an email to this group with any new links or changes or anything. Sorry about that, guys. We didn't even get a heads up that they were doing this. So
I'll put the link that worked for me in the chat, but if it's not correct, then, you know, please email out the correct link.
Thanks for flagging that, Erica.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's the old one.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, the new one isn't. I think might not be public yet.
So this is the old one. The application, all these are valid application materials, but what you don't have here is the recording or the slide deck. And then this person is not the PDC rep anymore. So yeah, we'll get on that and hopefully we can figure this out. Sorry, everyone. Very good. If there's nothing else, Jill, any parting words of wisdom? Do you want to say hi to the group?
No, you covered it. Yeah, I would just encourage you to think of projects. You're certainly welcome, depending on your availability, to support the application process, to gather photos, to provide maps, or help the locals out, local government agencies out. And we want projects that you all are excited about and that you support. We always welcome leveraged funds. The funds just don't go very far anymore. So if there's a project you have on your radar that could extend the road into something that's owned or maintained by a local agency, it doesn't have to be both. It could be federally owned but maintained by a county. So owned or maintained. We welcome your input and ideas there. So definitely work with them if you have something in mind, or combining projects. Oftentimes, you save a lot of money for economy of scale or joint site visits, stuff like that. So hopefully we get some great projects.
Very good. Well, thanks everyone. And yeah, hopefully some of you can get your weekend started early, and much appreciated. And again, feel free to reach out to myself or Jill if any other questions come up throughout the process. So. Thanks everybody.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Andrew.
All right. Thank you.
Bet.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you.